Sometimes life feels like a strange in-between place, not quite heaven, not quite earth, just waiting. You've prayed, you've cried, you've believed, but it feels like God has pressed pause. Nothing moves. Doors don't open. Silence fills your soul. And in that silence, you start to wonder, did I do something wrong? But what if I told you, you're not being ignored, you're being prepared. You're not forgotten, you're in the waiting room of heaven. Because this place you're in right now, this quiet, uncertain space, is where heaven does some of its deepest work. It's not punishment. It's preparation. You see, when heaven is silent, it's never absent. When God delays, He's never denying. He's aligning things you can't even see yet. You think nothing's happening. But in heaven's waiting room, everything is happening. Angels are moving. Mountains are shifting. And timing, perfect timing, is being set in motion. You're not stuck. You're being positioned. Every delay you've cried over, every prayer that seemed unanswered, every moment you thought was wasted, it's all being weaved together into something divine. The waiting room of heaven isn't empty. It's full of promise. It's where heaven teaches you patience, trust, and faith that doesn't depend on results. Because when you're in that waiting room, heaven watches how you wait. Anyone can worship when the blessing comes. But only the chosen ones worship while waiting. Only the strong still believe when the miracle hasn't yet shown up. Only those who've truly surrendered can sit in heaven's waiting room and say, even here, I trust you. There's a beauty in waiting that only heaven understands. It's in the waiting that your roots grow deep. It's in the waiting that your heart learns humility. It's in the waiting that your faith transforms from fragile to unshakable. You see, God doesn't rush growth, He refines it. He's not late. He's building something eternal in you. That's why you feel the delay. Because what He's preparing for you is bigger than you think. You're not being held back, you're being held together. Heaven's timing is different. Heaven's process is sacred. Heaven's silence is never a no, it's a not yet. Maybe right now, it feels like everyone else's life is moving faster than yours. You watch them succeed, get what they prayed for, and you smile, but deep down you ache. You wonder, when is it my turn? But remember this, God doesn't forget turns. He just takes time to make sure yours is perfect. While you wait, He's not ignoring you, He's introducing you to yourself. Because before He blesses you publicly, He builds you privately. The waiting room of heaven is where character replaces ego, where patience replaces pride, where dependence on God replaces control. He's not just preparing what's coming for you. He's preparing you for what's coming. Because if He gave it too soon, you might not be ready to hold it. And heaven loves you too much to give you something you're not yet mature enough to carry. You see, you've been asking God to open doors, but sometimes heaven's greatest mercy is the door that stays closed. Not because it's rejection, but because it's redirection. Some prayers don't get answered the way you expect, because heaven sees the path you can't. You wanted speed, but heaven wanted strength. You wanted comfort, but heaven wanted growth. And that's the truth about the waiting room. It's where you learn that faith isn't about getting what you want. It's about trusting God, even when you don't understand what He's doing. So if you're sitting there, feeling forgotten, remember this, heaven has not forgotten your name. Your prayers didn't vanish. They're being held in sacred hands, waiting for the divine moment to be released. Heaven doesn't deliver blessings when you demand them, it delivers them when your heart is ready to hold them. Sometimes God lets you sit in silence so that you can hear what noise once drowned out, His whisper. The whisper that says, I'm still here. The whisper that says, you're closer than you think. The whisper that says, trust me. Because the waiting room of heaven is not an empty place, it's a holy one. It's where the unseen happens. It's where destiny breathes before it's born. And when your time comes, you'll realize that every delay was actually divine direction. Heaven's waiting room isn't just about waiting, it's about transformation. It's about turning pain into purpose, confusion into clarity, and waiting into worship. Because the more you wait, the more you realize that what you were waiting for was never the point. What matters is who you became while waiting. There are people in the Bible who understood this better than anyone. Joseph spent years in prison before becoming a ruler. David was anointed king but had to run for his life before he could wear the crown. Even Jesus waited 30 years for a 3-year ministry. Heaven's waiting room is sacred because it's where destiny matures. So don't rush it. Don't compare your journey to others. Your story is written by a hand that knows the end from the beginning. And maybe you don't see it now, but one day you'll look back and say, "If I had received it earlier, I wouldn't have appreciated it." Heaven's timing may test you, but it will never fail you. Every season of silence is pregnant with purpose. Every not yet from God is still a yes, just on heaven's schedule. Sometimes heaven will hold you in the waiting room until your heart says, "Even if it doesn't happen, I'll still love you." That's when heaven moves. Because true faith isn't found in answered prayers, it's found in surrendered hearts. And maybe that's why you're here, not because you did something wrong, but because heaven chose you to be still long enough to hear the divine whisper that most people rush past. The waiting room isn't a punishment, it's a privilege. Because God only makes you wait when what He's preparing for you is worth waiting for. Heaven's waiting room will test your patience, yes, but it will also reveal your strength. It will break your dependence on timelines and teach you to trust in eternity. You'll stop measuring your life in minutes and start seeing it in meaning. Right now, you might be sitting in that invisible space, the in-between. Not where you used to be, and not yet where you want to be. It feels like floating. It feels like nothing's moving. But listen, heaven is always moving. Even when you can't see it, heaven is rearranging everything behind the scenes. You may not realize it, but you're being refined. The person who walked into this waiting room won't be the same one who walks out. You'll walk out wiser, softer, stronger, and with a faith that glows like gold tested by fire. So the next time you feel like you're stuck, remember this: waiting isn't wasted. You're not delayed, you're being developed. The waiting room of heaven is where miracles are silently shaped. And when heaven finally calls your name, it won't just open a door, it will open the door. The one that fits your soul perfectly. Until then, worship while you wait. Love while you linger. Hope while it hurts. Because the waiting room is still part of heaven's house. And just because the door hasn't opened yet, doesn't mean you're not already inside. You're closer to the promise than you think. Heaven hasn't forgotten you. It's preparing the moment when everything will make sense. And when that day comes, you'll look back at the silence and say, "That was God too." So sit. Breathe. Be still. You're not behind schedule. You're not being punished. You're in the waiting room of heaven, the most sacred space between who you were and who you're about to become. Because heaven never rushes perfection. And you, my friend, are heaven's work in progress. You're in the waiting room of heaven. But don't lose heart, the door is about to open. And when it does, you'll understand why it took this long. Every second of waiting was worth it. And then, the silence begins to break. At first, it's faint, like a whisper at the edge of your soul. You don't quite recognize it, but something inside you stirs. The same quiet place that once felt heavy suddenly feels holy. The air changes. It's softer, warmer. You can almost sense heaven leaning closer, like a sunrise about to touch the earth. You don't realize it yet, but the waiting room has started to open. Because heaven never leaves you waiting forever. Every second has been measured, every tear has been counted, and every quiet prayer has been heard. The waiting room wasn't just holding you still, it was holding you safe. The walls of delay were actually arms of protection. The silence that broke your heart was the same silence that healed it. You start to feel peace again. Not the kind that depends on answers, but the kind that lives inside you regardless of them. That's when you know, heaven's timing is near. See, when you've waited long enough, your spirit changes. You stop begging God for what you want and start trusting Him for what He knows is right. You stop measuring your faith by outcomes and start measuring it by endurance. You begin to understand that waiting wasn't about receiving something. It was about becoming someone. You've grown in ways you can't even see. You've learned how to bend without breaking. You've discovered how to smile through storms, how to worship through wounds, and how to love through loss. You've learned that silence doesn't mean absence, it means sacred space. And that's when heaven says, "Now you're ready." Because heaven doesn't just bless you with gifts, it blesses you with growth. You were being shaped for a story greater than the one you imagined. Every delay refined you. Every disappointment redirected you. Every "not yet" was secretly "not now, but soon." And now that "soon" is whispering your name. The light starts to shift in the waiting room. The walls that once felt like barriers begin to shimmer like gateways. You realize, this was never a holding cell, it was a holy classroom. You weren't forgotten, you were being educated in divine patience. God begins to unfold what was hidden. The same path that once looked like a dead end now reveals turns and trails that lead straight to purpose. The timing, the pain, the stillness, all of it aligns like stars finding their place. Heaven opens the door, not with noise or lightning, but with peace. It doesn't rush in, it flows like light through cracks, gentle but unstoppable. You realize that everything you've been waiting for has been waiting for you to become this version of yourself, the one who can handle it with gratitude, not greed, with wisdom, not worry. And when heaven finally opens that door, you don't sprint. You walk slowly, humbly, reverently, because now you understand the sacred weight of what's ahead. You don't just receive blessings anymore, you recognize them. You no longer chase after what's shiny, you protect what's holy. You've learned that heaven's gifts aren't always loud, sometimes they arrive as peace that stays. You look back once, at the waiting room that taught you how to breathe through breaking, how to worship through wondering, how to trust when trust felt impossible, and you whisper, "Thank you?" That's when heaven smiles. Because that's what it was all about, bringing you to the place where gratitude comes before gain. Now, as you step through the open door, something sacred happens. It's not fireworks or applause, it's stillness, but different now. It's not the silence of waiting, it's the silence of arrival. You've crossed over from someday to now. But you know something beautiful. Heaven's waiting rooms never truly disappear. They just change shape. Because every new blessing carries a new waiting, every new door leads to a new hallway. But now you're not afraid. You understand the rhythm of heaven, the ebb, the flow, the pause, the promise. You're stronger, wiser, softer. The waiting room didn't just prepare you for what was next, it prepared you for anything. And so you walk, not as someone who finally got what they wanted, but as someone who finally became what they were meant to be. You'll still have moments where fear whispers. You'll still face nights when prayers go unanswered. But now you'll smile, because you know what that means, heaven is working again. The waiting room wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a new way to live. You start to see the world differently now. The people rushing around you don't make you jealous anymore, they make you compassionate. Because you know the pain of waiting, the ache of silence, the weight of not knowing. You start to carry peace like a lantern, reminding others that heaven's delays aren't denials. You speak with gentleness, because you remember the days when all you needed was one quiet reminder that you weren't alone. And maybe that's why heaven made you wait, so you could become a messenger for those still sitting where you once sat. So you could tell them, "Hold on. Heaven hasn't forgotten you. You're in the waiting room, but that means your name is already on the list." Every person who ever carried greatness had to wait. Every heart that ever shone with faith was once tested in the dark. You realize that even your tears were a kind of worship, liquid prayers that heaven caught before they fell. And the most beautiful thing? You begin to understand that heaven never wastes anything. Not your pain, not your patience, not your process. It all becomes part of your purpose. When you look around, the world looks the same, but you see it differently. You notice how every sunrise feels like a promise now. Every quiet night feels like peace. Every delay feels like design. You've stepped into a new awareness, that heaven's hand has been on you the whole time. You begin to thank God not only for the blessings, but for the waiting itself. Because without it, you wouldn't have learned the language of faith. You wouldn't have recognized the whisper behind the noise. And so, your heart changes. Gratitude becomes your natural state. You find beauty even in uncertainty. You stop needing everything to make sense. You just trust. You finally understand that heaven's waiting room wasn't about time, it was about transformation. And then, one day, you'll meet someone sitting in their own waiting room. Their eyes will hold the same ache yours once did. And you'll sit beside them, not with answers, but with empathy. You'll tell them what heaven taught you, that the waiting is holy, that silence isn't punishment, that the promise is still alive. You'll remind them that heaven always keeps its word, just not always on our schedule. And they'll listen. And something in them will shift. Because hope is contagious, and now you carry it. You become living proof that the waiting room isn't the end of the story, it's where the real story begins. And as life moves on, you'll still enter new waiting rooms, because that's how heaven keeps teaching. But this time, you'll wait differently. You'll wait with peace instead of panic, with worship instead of worry. You'll look around and say, I've been here before, and I know how this ends, with purpose. That's the beauty of heaven's rhythm. It teaches you to rest even when you can't see results. To trust that if God could bring you through before, He'll do it again. You'll start to realize that heaven's waiting room isn't somewhere out there. It's within you, a sacred place where patience and faith hold hands. And every time you sit there again, you'll feel that same warmth, the presence that says, I'm still working. Because heaven's greatest miracles don't happen when doors open. They happen while you're waiting. That's where your heart learns to recognize the divine, not in the fireworks, but in the faithfulness. And when you finally walk through the next door, you'll smile, not because you're surprised it opened, but because you knew it always would. The waiting was never wasted. It was worship in disguise. You're not in a forgotten place. You're in a forming place. You're not lost, you're being led. And every time heaven makes you wait, it's only because what's coming next is too beautiful to be rushed. So sit with peace. Rest in the process. Heaven hasn't abandoned you. It's arranging your miracle. You're still in the waiting room, but now you understand it. You see the light through the cracks. You feel the warmth of a promise about to arrive. You don't just hope, you know. Because once you've waited with heaven, you're never the same again. And when your door opens, whether it's tomorrow, next year, or in eternity, you'll step through not as someone desperate for an answer, but as someone transformed by the waiting. You'll walk out carrying heaven inside you. And maybe that's the secret all along. Heaven's waiting room wasn't about getting you to heaven. It was about getting heaven into you. That's where the waiting ends, and the becoming begins. And after you've walked through that door, after the long nights and the silent prayers, something within you begins to bloom. Quietly, beautifully, almost unnoticeably at first. You realize that what you gained in the waiting was far greater than anything you were waiting for. You begin to see that heaven never wanted to just answer your prayer. Heaven wanted to change you through it. The old you, the one that feared the silence, the one that needed control, the one that doubted, that version of you couldn't have carried the peace you hold now. The waiting stripped away everything temporary so that what was eternal could finally take root. Now your faith no longer trembles with time. It stands steady like an ancient tree whose roots have touched something divine. You've stopped chasing signs because you've become one. Your life itself now whispers, "Wait, it's worth it." And that whisper becomes your ministry. Not a pulpit, not a platform, just your presence. You carry peace into places where chaos used to rule. You speak softly, but your words carry weight because they were forged in silence. People feel heaven when they're near you, not because you preach it, but because you lived it. You've seen the heart of waiting, and it's not empty. It's where God lives. It's where He teaches you to trust beyond sight, to hope beyond logic, to love beyond fear. You've discovered that miracles don't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes, they come with understanding. And in that understanding, you begin to find heaven everywhere. In the sunrise that doesn't hurry. In the rain that falls exactly when it should. In the moments that used to frustrate you, traffic jams, long lines, slow days, you now smile, because you know, even waiting on earth is a reflection of waiting in heaven. Everything sacred takes time. You start to walk slower, speak gentler, love deeper. The rush is gone. The panic is gone. You've tasted the sweetness of surrender, and nothing else compares. You don't fear unanswered prayers anymore. You just whisper, "In your time, Lord." Because you've seen what happens when heaven's timing finally arrives. It's always perfect, always worth every tear, every moment of silence. And when life tests you again, because it will, you'll remember this feeling. The stillness. The peace. The knowing that even when everything seems motionless, God is still moving. The waiting room taught you how to breathe without fear, how to stand in storms without shaking, how to rest in the mystery of divine timing. You'll no longer see waiting as wasted time, but as sacred time. The kind of time heaven uses to shape eternity within you. And one day, when you reach the end of your journey, when your soul stands at heaven's real gates, you'll look back at all the waiting rooms of your life, and you'll smile. Because you'll finally understand that every pause, every silence, every "not yet" was heaven preparing you for that moment, for the eternal presence you were always being drawn toward. All the questions will fade. The whys will dissolve. And only gratitude will remain. You'll realize that heaven's waiting rooms were never meant to test your patience. They were meant to teach you heaven's language, trust. You'll see that waiting was just another word for becoming. And in every moment of stillness, heaven was quietly writing your story, not one of delay, but of divine design. And so, even now, while you're still here, still walking through days that sometimes feel like pauses, you'll carry this truth with you. Heaven doesn't make you wait to punish you. It makes you wait to perfect you. Because faith isn't about getting everything you want, it's about becoming everything God created you to be. And you have become that. You are the proof that silence isn't empty, that stillness isn't wasted, that waiting isn't weakness. You are the testimony that heaven's timing is worth trusting. So if you ever find yourself in another waiting room, whether it's for healing, for love, for purpose, for peace, don't despair. Smile gently, because you know what this means. Heaven is near. Heaven is working. Heaven is whispering. Hold on. It's almost time. And maybe, just maybe, you'll close your eyes and feel that same warm light again, the one that surrounded you before the door opened. The one that told you that heaven's presence is never tied to progress, it's tied to you. Because once heaven lives inside you, you're never really waiting alone. You've become the stillness. You've become the peace. You've become the waiting room that holds space for others until their doors open too. That's what heaven wanted all along, to make you a reflection of itself. And when people look into your eyes now, they'll see it, that calm that doesn't come from easy days, but from sacred waiting. That quiet confidence that says, "I've seen heaven work behind closed doors." You'll walk with light in your step, not because everything is perfect, but because you finally understand, everything is purposeful. The waiting didn't take anything from you. It gave you something eternal. It gave you peace. It gave you faith. It gave you heaven. And that's when you'll whisper again, the same words that once comforted you in the stillness. "I'm not forgotten. I'm being formed." Because now you know, every pause is sacred, every silence is holy, and every waiting room in your life is just heaven getting ready to open another beautiful door. And this time, you won't just walk through it. You'll shine through it. And as you shine through that new door, the world around you feels different, not because it changed, but because you did. You no longer chase blessings, you carry them. You no longer fear silence, you find peace inside it. Every heartbeat feels like a conversation with heaven, every breath a reminder that waiting was never empty, it was sacred. You realize now that heaven was never far away. It was building you, breathing through you, guiding you the whole time. You're no longer waiting for heaven, you've become a piece of it on earth.